The night air over King's Landing felt thick with old smoke and the hush of secrets best kept beneath stone. Brienne of Tarth stood upon the rampart above the Red Keep's western wall, her great cloak billowing behind her like the sail of some lone vessel adrift on a moonlit sea. Oathkeeper rested in her mailed fists, its rippled Valyrian steel edge drawing a thin line of red from the last torch still guttering beside the crenellation. In the bronze of the torchlight, the sword's dark waves appeared to pulse as if alive, tiny veins of dull ember running along the fuller and vanishing again when the wind blew the flame sideways. She turned the blade slowly, watching that flicker, trying to decide whether it was only torchfire playing tricks or something buried in the metal itself. Something waiting. She remembered the forge heat of Tobo Mott's shop, the clangor that accompanied Jaime Lannister's gift, the way the Lion Knight's eyes had glimmered with a kind of respect she had never expected from him. Keep it safe. Keep her safe, he had said, meaning Sansa Stark at first, but by the end perhaps meaning Brienne herself. In the months since, she had kept the sword closer than her own heart. Oaths had weight. Steel had memory. Below, the city had fallen into an uneasy sleep after yet another day of smallfolk festival made in Tommen Baratheon's honor. Royal largesse meant to quiet rumors of dragons far to the east, of winter wolves gathering in the snow, of a red woman who now walked the halls of the capital whispering of a single sword of living fire. Brienne had overheard the gossip in the dragon pit when she lingered on patrol. Most dismissed it as nonsense, but she felt a shiver each time living fire passed between nervous lips. Footsteps rang behind her. Ser Balon Swan approached in careful deference, helm under his arm. "My lady, sir," he corrected with a faint cough. "The Lord Hand bids the Kingsguard to the small council at first light. Word from Old Town." His glance brushed Oathkeeper's edge, and for an instant something like wonder crossed his face. "It glimmers tonight." "It's only the torch," Brienne answered, closing her fingers tighter upon the grip. But she marked how Balon's eyes widened before he bowed and withdrew. When she looked again, the ember shining down the blade had gone black. Dawn seeped through the tall windows of the council chamber the next morning. Washing pail rose across the marble floor. Lord Hand Tarly presided, stern as granite, with maesters milling at his elbow and Queen Marjorie seated in muted jade, her face drawn from a night spent praying for swift harvests. Brienne took her place among the white cloaks, though hers was not yet white. She bore only the deep blue surcoat of Tarth over gold-rimmed mail, a concession to her station as sword sworn to Lady Sansa Stark, though Sansa was still in the Vale. It set her slightly apart, neither fish nor fowl, and that suited her fine. Grand Maester Lampshire rolled a parchment open. A raven from the citadel before sunrise. Archmaester Ibros reports a portent in the heavens. 7 bloody portents in as many months, Lord Tarly muttered. This one concerns the sword Lightbringer, Lampshire persisted. According to ancient prophecy, when the red star bleeds and darkness gathers, Azor Ahai shall awaken and draw Lightbringer from the fire. The sword shall burn, and all the dead will flee before it.
Ser Loras shifted beside Brienne, armor creaking.
Melisandre preached the same of Stannis Baratheon, and we saw how that ended. Dragons live once more, said Queen Marjorie, voice soft but clear. If half the tales of Daenerys Targaryen are true, prophecy walks the world again. Her gaze slid toward Brienne. And what of other blades forged in dragonfire? The hand followed her eyes. Ser Brienne, come forward. Show us Oathkeeper. A murmur rippled about the table. Brienne felt heat crawl up her cheeks yet stepped forward. She unsheathed the sword, laying its length across gloved palms. The sunlight struck the blade, and crimson bloomed along the ripples. Not the pale, dancing gleam of polished metal, nor the fickle red of reflected silk. This was an ember glow, faint and pulsing, as though a heart beat within the steel. A hush fell so complete she could hear the squeak of quill nibs in the corner. It's been doing that, she admitted, voice lower than the surf upon Tartha's shores. Only at night first. Now, whenever dawn comes. Grand Maester Lampshire bent close, spectacles flashing. It never grows hot? It grows warm in my hand, Brienne said. Not enough to burn. Tarly scraped back his chair. Have the High Septon examine it, and the alchemists and Maester Qyburn besides. He almost spat the last name. Distaste for the darker arts was never far from him. If dragons return and a red sword ignites in the hands of a knight of the realm, I want answers. Answers, echoed Marjorie, eyes alight. Brienne bowed stiffly and resheathed the blade. On her way from the council chamber, Melisandre stood waiting by the door in scarlet wool, her ruddy hair spilling over pale shoulders. She smiled without warmth. Valyrian steel remembers fire, the red woman said, falling into step. But Lightbringer is more than memory. When the time comes, the blade will drink pain and shine brighter than dawn. Tell me, daughter of Tarth, do you know what it costs to forge Lightbringer? Brienne stared forward. I know old tales. Do you know the tale of the loyal heart plunged into its own lover's breast to quench the sword? The agony that sealed flame into steel? Melisandre's hand brushed Brienne's vambrace. Do not shrink from pain. Prophecy never does. Brienne jerked away. Keep your prophecies. I have my oath. Yes, Melisandre murmured. We shall see whose oath burns hottest. 3 nights later, Brienne rode through the Gate of the Gods with 4 white cloaks at her back. The order had been swift. Escort a convoy of winter grain to Rosby, then continue to Maidenpool, where Lord Edmure Tully would meet them en route north with a fresh contingent of river knights. Even with peace blossoming of a fragile sort, the road still teemed with deserters, broken men, and rumors of shadow wolves in the mists. The king's stores could not be lost. The city fell away behind them. Brienne felt the old ache in her shoulders as every mile put distance between her and Sansa Stark's trail in the Vale. But a king's need was a king's need. She had been bred to serve.
Honor compels state.
So her father had taught her, and though his grave lay far across the narrow sea of her memory, she heard his voice in every clink of mail. That first camp lay in a meadow where harebells bowed silver beneath the moon. Brienne sat alone polishing Oathkeeper, but tonight the sword required no oil. It hummed softly against the cloth, warm, alive. When she laid her fingers upon the edge, sparks leapt, tiny motes darting like fireflies before winking out. She nearly dropped it.
Ser
Hyle Hunt materialized from the shadows, brows raised. They had once shared scornful words and bruised egos at Highgarden. Yet time and sorrow had tempered them into a blunt camaraderie. Looks like the blade has taken to singing. It's nothing. Brienne wrapped the cloth tighter. Hyle crouched. The men talk. They say you carry the red sword of heroes now. They say it glowed on the small council floor like dawn come early. Talk less, Brienne advised. He chuckled. I will when talk is less interesting. His smile faded. There's a feeling in the air, Brienne, like storms building off Shipbreaker. And in storms, folk look for torches. She glanced at the sword in her lap and thought, torches burn out. At Rosby, they found the castle's gates flung wide and the small folk gathered on the green. Lord Giles was dead of lung rot, and his cousin had spent the night reading portents in the flames of the hearth. She claimed a shadow in the coals shaped like a lion had devoured a crane of ashes, leaving a sword of red at the end. When Brienne's column arrived, she fell to her knees before Oathkeeper, begging to touch the blade and be cleansed of sin. Brienne refused her gently, but the story spread faster than the convoy could roll. By the time they crossed Blackwater Rush, rumor had outraced them to every hamlet. Lightbringer marched to meet the winter. On the King's Road, they encountered Septons weaving crowns of crimson holly, girls crying that the Maiden of Flame had come, men carving the 7-pointed star into oak branches and setting them aflame as lanterns. Brienne rode through them all, jaw set, heart drumming. She had wanted only to keep a promise made beneath weirwood boughs, to find Sansa Stark and see her safe. Now strangers knelt in her path as if the old gods themselves had split her skin and crawled inside. She wondered whether Jaime Lannister had foreseen any of this when he pressed the sword into her hands. Keep her safe. He could not have known what else she would keep. Melisandre arrived on the 4th evening since Rosby, slipping out of the dark ahead of their vanguard like a flame refusing to die. She wore no cloak despite the chill, and a red glow, the color of banked coals, seemed to linger around her. She rode astride a dappled palfrey and guided it straight toward Brienne. "The night is long," the Red Woman said, "but we shall make it shorter." "I did not ask for your company," Brienne replied. "The sword did." Melisandre's smile shone white as bone. "Do you hear it any more in your dreams? Does it call for blood warmed by love?" "Lightbringer." Brienne gripped the reins. "I need no lessons in love or blood. Leave, before the Kingsguard binds you for witchcraft." "Bind fire," Melisandre laughed softly. "Try." Brienne's reply withered in her throat. For just a second, the ruby at Melisandre's throat blazed like the heart of a forge, and Oathkeeper answered. Its hilt grew hot, the quillins shimmering. The glow vanished as quickly, leaving only night and frost tingling across Brienne's skin. They rode on. Maidenpool's salt-stiff air carried hints of gull cry and distant thunder. Lord Mouton offered fresh bread, butter, pickled eel. Yet even in the feasting hall, Brienne sensed eyes drifting toward the sword across her back more than toward the salted boar on silver platters. Conversation ebbed whenever she passed. At dawn, as she waited in the yard for Edmure Tully's arrival, Melisandre approached again. "Winter is breaking its chains," she said. "Do you know what lies beyond those hills tonight? Dead things that wear the skins of men. Even here they have been glimpsed by poachers. How many will burn at your blade's touch? Will you test it?" "I will protect the king's grain," Brienne answered. "Grain feeds living mouths. What will feed the dead?" Before Brienne could retort, a horn wailed from the outer wall. Riders raced forward to meet a single horse stumbling through the gate. The courier sagged in the saddle, mail rent open and crusted black. White frost clung to his beard even in the mild coastal air. He slid limp to the stones, clutching a fragment of leather spattered with frozen crimson. Brienne knelt, easing him down. His eyes were milk-filmed, his breath shallow. Yet he turned toward the sword hilt jutting over her shoulder. "They come," he rasped through cracked lips. "Shadows in snow. Ser Edmure's host. Cut apart, North Ridge." His gaze fixed on Oathkeeper, and there was a plea there as raw as any oath. "Burn them." He exhaled once more and lay still. Ser Balon Swan drew in a hiss. "If Lord Tully's levy is destroyed, the King's Road is lost." "A trap or truth?" Ser Loras muttered. Brienne rose. She could feel the sword through the scabbard like a live coal pressed to her spine. She thought of Sansa somewhere beyond the veil, of Jaime's smirk and his whispered command. Keep her safe. But safety meant more now: safe grain, safe realm, safe dawn. Lines broadened like ripples on still water. She turned to the small folk huddling near the stables. "We march," she called. "Load the wagons with everything that can burn, the straw, the oil, the torches." She glared at Melisandre. "If your fire is true, tend it. If it is lies, night will find you too." To the Kingsguard she added, "Steel yourselves." Within an hour, a grim caravan wound into the foothills north of Maidenpool. 30 wagons of barley and wheat, 200 raw levies, for Kingsguard knights and Brienne, and the Red Woman riding silent as a specter. Cold mist wrapped them thicker with every mile. They found Edmure Tully's camp at dusk, a charnel court of twisted banners and spilled entrails. Horses lay ripped open, their eyes gnawed away, their hides crawling with frost. Men hung cocooned in ice upon spear points, grimacing in silent screams. Footprints, bare, wide, and clawed, trailed off between fir trees glowing argent under a half-moon. No carrion bird dared land. Brienne dismounted, heart slamming, to search among the dead for Lord Tully. She found instead a white shadow moving at the camp's edge. A man once, though no blood now pulsed. Its skin blue-gray, eyes radiant sapphire, cocked its head, sniffed, and began to grin. "Oathkeeper," Melisandre whispered from behind. "Light it." Brienne drew. The blade leapt free in a gout of crimson flame so sudden her breath vanished in a puff of steam. The fire curled along the edge, licking toward the point yet never consuming the steel. The heat radiated outward, warming her breastplate. Gasps trembled from the levies behind. The white shadow hissed, retreating a step. It lifted a long ice spear. More shapes crowded beyond the trees, eyes winking blue in the gloom. Brienne had no thought to question or marvel. She advanced, holding the sword two-handed. The flame brightened with every stride. Her first cut sliced through spear haft and torso both, and the creature shattered in a crystalline burst. The fire fed on victory, roaring louder. Figures charged, the dead of Edmure's host, risen in silent murder. Oathkeeper, Lightbringer, carved them apart, each stroke leaving burning trails in the night air. The dead crumbled to ash that hissed as it hit the snow, vanishing under the scarlet glare. Behind her, men chanted something indiscernible, half prayer, half terror. Brienne waded deeper. Memories flashed. Renly's Rainbow Guard Pavilion, Jaime's smug half-smile. Her father at Evenfall Hall teaching her how to parry a boorish cousin's clumsy swings. She wondered if they could see her now, armored in fire. A shape loomed taller than a horse, antlers sprouting from a skull mask of ice. A horned walker. It swung a blade of frozen black, hard and silent. Lightbringer met it with an eruption of sparks. Steel shrieked, and the frozen sword cracked, splintered, and blew away. Brienne drove the point through the walker's chest. The creature exploded in a column of blue flame so bright she closed her eyes, and in that darkness she felt a hand upon hers, warm, human. When she looked again, Melisandre stood at her side, ruby blazing. "You see, Brienne of Tarth," the red woman murmured. "Light answers light." The field fell quiet. Snowflakes drifted where ash should have. Dead men lay still and would not rise again. The mist ebbed back toward the distant hills. Brienne lowered the sword. It still blazed, though the heat had gentled from furnace to hearth. She could not tell how many heartbeats had passed. Around her, knights and levies knelt. Hyle Hunt sank to one knee, mouth open in stunned piety. Balon Swan pressed hand to breast, eyes shining. Even Ser Loras knelt, head bowed. Queen's justice or not, she had become something else to them now. They set camp upon the butchered meadow and burned the corpses. Oathkeeper's fire spread to pitch-soaked logs until pyres roared high into the night. Brienne stood watch, sword planted point down, hands atop the pommel. The flames cast her shadow across the snow, long and black. Melisandre approached once more, but Brienne raised a gauntlet hand. "No more tales tonight," she said. "Only truth, my lady," Melisandre replied. "Steel remembers pain. You saw what must be done. Lightbringer must lead the realm." Brienne stared into the blaze. "I lead no realm. You will. When the dead ride south, they will carve through every garrison between here and the capital. They will come for the king, for the queen, for every child in Flea Bottom. You will stand before them with this sword, or you will kneel behind someone less worthy." Brienne's jaw tightened. A knight of the Kingsguard serves. She does not reign. Then serve by standing. Men follow fire. The next fortnight blurred. Villages emptied to join their march. White ravens from the citadel fluttered overhead, signaling winter's commencement. Rumors of whites on the King's Road multiplied. Each dusk the sword's glow brightened sooner. Each dawn it faded later. Brienne tried wearing it wrapped in cloth to hide the trembling ember within, but cloth singed and blackened until she abandoned pretense. Lightbringer rode naked on her hip, and the men took heart. At the Trident's Ford, a delegation from King Tommen awaited on cream stallions. Ser Kevan Lannister himself bore the king's seal in yellow wax. Return at once. The council summons the bearer of Lightbringer to trial by faith and science. The Grand Inquisitor of the Seven desired proof. The Alchemists' Guild claimed the glow a trick of wildfire encased in glass veins. The High Septon warned of sorcery. Behind the parchment, Brienne smelled fear. "I return when the grain is safe," she told Kevan. "And when the dead grow quiet." Kevan stared at the sword's pulsing edge, swallowed, and nodded. "The king's writ cannot bar you. Not now. Just remember the throne needs friends, not messiahs." Brienne almost laughed, but instead said, "I remember oaths." They reached the neck on a morning veiled in white fog. Scouts sent ahead galloped back with terror writ on their faces. The causeway leagues beyond was choked with corpses that moved. Dawn rose blood-red behind the clouds. Brienne assembled the levies atop a low ridge. As she addressed them, she realized her words emerged not in the uncertain baritone she remembered, but in a voice clear and ringing, each syllable carried by fire in her veins. "You have seen shadows and walked away living," she told them. "Others will not be so blessed unless we stand. The cold comes for us all. Light stands in our hands. Be that light." Cheeks flushed, the men beat spears on shields. Melisandre lifted both arms and began a chant in rolling Valyrian, the words molten with reverence. Lightbringer answered, flame licking higher, yet Brienne felt no burn upon her gloves. Instead, the sword's fervor flowed into her muscles. They marched down the ridge as the dead came shambling through the mire, a tide of bone and rime-stiff flesh. The first crash of shield and fangs rang out as horse met corpse. Brienne rode the line, blade painting arcs of crimson brilliance across the marsh mist. Every corpse touch turned to cinder, and where the cinders fell, mud hissed and bubbled, ice melting to steam. Hours blurred into fevered color. She fought until her arm numbed. She swapped hands and fought on. Through it all, Lightbringer sung, a low keening almost below hearing, sorrow and fury both. When the last corpse sank beneath boiling muck, silence returned like a gasp. She dismounted, knees trembling at last. Men stared at her as though staring into sunrise.
Ser Valon Swan approached.
"Ser Brienne," he said, helmet under his arm. "By witness of gods and men, I name you Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Brie." Enani shook her head wearily. "Ser Boros Blunt sits as Lord Commander in the capital. He was slain by White's 2 nights past," Balon said, voice rough. "Another raven from the city. The dead attacked the northern gate. They were repelled, but losses were grave." His eyes flicked to the sword. "The king calls for his light." Melisandre stepped from the fog behind them. "You cannot deny destiny forever. The sword has chosen, and you have chosen likewise. Kneel, sworn brothers." One by one, the white cloaks dropped to a knee upon the damp earth. Balon, Loras, Hyle, 3 others who had joined since Maidenpool. Their capes spread behind them in a ragged circle, steadied by chill wind. Brienne stood at its center. Balon looked up, weary hope etched in crow's feet. "Command us," he whispered. Brienne closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's lullabies, the taste of Isle of Tartha's sweet oranges, Renly's laughing command to defend him in his rainbow guard, Jaime's hesitant respect, Sansa's trusting hands clasped in hers. She remembered the first time she lifted a practiced sword, knees quaking, heart soaring, believing, however fleetingly, that valor could be a woman's gift as well. Now here she stood with a blade that carried sunfire in its marrow and men waiting to follow where she led. She planted Lightbringer point first in soft earth. The flames dimmed, leaving its rippled edge bare, though warm to sight. "I am Brienne of Tarth," she said, voice carrying over the marshes. "I have sworn more oaths than most men speak truths in their lives. I will not break a single one. If the sword wills me to stand as its bearer, then you will stand beside me, not beneath me." She raised the blade. "Rise, Ser Knights of the Kingsguard. We march for King Tommen, for Queen Marjorie, for every child who has never brandished a sword in their life. We march for dawn." The marsh wind gusted. The flames returned at the blade's edge, but softer, like sunrise diffusing through mist, filling every face with living ember. The knights rose. Melisandre bowed, her ruby gleaming. Brienne turned north toward the King's Road. "Form ranks, gather torches, gather spears. The night is not ended." Word raced faster than ravenflight. Lightbringer blazed in a woman's hand, carving a swath through the undead at the neck. A new Lord Commander of the Kingsguard rode under no banner but morning fire. Small folk left their plows to trail the marching column, sometimes only to stare, sometimes to offer salted pork or a child's carved whistle as token of faith. Septons knelt, singing hymns long and used. Red priests flocked, their prayers rising like sparks. Twice more they clashed with dead hosts. Twice more the sword shone and the foe crumbled. Each battle left Brienne more aware of something beyond heat, an undercurrent of sorrow. Every time Lightbringer licked through a corpse's dark breast, she felt a pang as though plunging the blade into a friend's heart. The forging cost. She bore it with gritted teeth, but the weight grew. When at last the walls of Winterfell rose to greet them, stone gray beneath banners of crown staking lion and golden rose entwined, Brienne's column numbered 1,000, half of them farmers bearing pitchforks. Ravens had warned of a massive dead host assembling near the Dreadfort ruins, and King Tommen himself now rode north with the royal army and what remained of the faith militant. White cloaks needed to stand at his right hand. Snow whirled as Brienne dismounted within the bailey. Queen Marjorie hurried forward, face pale but composed. At her side walked Sansa Stark in white and gray cloak trimmed with fierce wolf's head clasps. Brienne's heart lurched in her chest at the sight. "My lady," she breathed, sinking to one knee, though she longed only to embrace Sansa like a little sister come at last into safe harbor. Sansa lifted her gently. "Sir Brienne," she murmured, eyes glimmering with tears unshed. "All of Winterfell thanks you. Without your blade and your courage, King Tommen would never have reached us." Behind them, castle courtiers whispered. The Maid of Tarth had become the Maiden of Flame, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Azor Ahai Reborn. But Brienne's gaze found only one set of eyes, Sansa's, warm and brave. Lightbringer pulsed at Brienne's hip, eager as a live thing, but its fire felt cooler now, as though comforted by proximity to the woman whose safety had first forged Brienne's oath. Melisandre joined them, red cloak snapping. "The sword awaits nightfall," she intoned. "When the dead host comes, flame must meet them." King Tommen appeared, small within his gilded great helm. He removed it with trembling hands, revealing cheeks wind-burned and eyes wide. "Sir Brienne," he said, voice cracking, "my counsel begs that you stand beside me on the battlements. The people say your sword alone can turn the tide. Will you accept command?" Brienne drew a slow breath. She sensed all eyes upon her. Snowflakes hissed to steam where they touched the blade's grip. She thought of Lightbringer's old sorrow, of the forging pain Melisandre had spoken of love fueling fire. She knelt before the boy king. "Your grace, I will wield Lightbringer not for crowns but for living souls. I will stand at your side until dawn comes or death closes my eyes. But promise me, after this night, the realm will honor every oath broken in terror, every debt denied to the powerless." Lightbringer burns falsehood as swiftly as shadow. Tommen blinked, then nodded solemnly. "I promise." Brienne rose, turning toward the jeering wind. Somewhere in darkness beyond Winterfell's flickering torches, horns of ice would soon cry. She felt the sword tighten in her grasp like a heartbeat. The Kingsguard formed around her, white cloaks plastered to armor by snow, and she lifted Lightbringer high. Its flame jumped skyward, painting the swirling snow crimson. Far above, the clouds parted, and a single red star flickered through, a wound in heaven bleeding light upon steel. And Brienne of Tarth, once mocked as the wench, once spurned as brute and fool, now flared bright enough to blind the night itself. The snow began in earnest 2 hours past noon, a thick, drifting cloud that transformed the world beyond Winterfell's battlements into a slow-whirling maelstrom of white. Brienne paced the length of the outer wall with her visor lifted, breath coiling in silver skeins. Lightbringer rested naked across her back, muffled only by the deep blue cloak of Tarth now scorched at the edges. Though it lay sheathed, the blade radiated a gentle warmth that bled through boiled leather and steel, a constant pulse against her spine that matched, unervingly, the beat of her own heart. Below, the castle yard pulsed with frantic purpose. Blacksmiths hammered spike-soled shoes for horses that had never known true ice. Cooks hauled barrels of lard up winding stairs to pour over the ramparts when the dead pressed close. Children too young to fight filled tens of thousands of clay flasks with lamp oil, stoppered them, then passed them hand to hand in long, silent lines toward the towers. Everywhere Brienne looked she saw fire being prepared, torches stacked in wagon beds, braziers packed with pine pitch, bundles of arrows soaked in tallow. The small folk had seized upon flame as upon a prayer whose words even babes could remember. She crossed the parapet until she reached the first keep, where the ancient stones sagged inward like a toothless grin. Davos Seaworth waited there, stump wrapped in fresh linen, the fingers he had left tapping the pommel of a short sword. He inclined his head when she approached. "Sir, no, forgive me, Lord Commander," he said, tone half-teasing, half-weary. "Have you slept?" Brienne shook her head. "I will after. Storm's End taught me a thing or two about defending walls." Davos went on. "See that troop of archers at the western crenellations? They're green boys from Deepwood Mott who've never loosed in anger. Put veterans beside them or pull them back. One shiver of panic and they'll waste every arrow before the dead are in range." She scanned the line. "You lead them. They'll hold under you." Davos gave a rueful chuckle. "I told my wife I'd never command men again. Yet here I am, ordering lads whose names I barely know to kill what ought to stay dead." He sobered. "This sword of yours, does it feel different today?" "It feels awake," Brienne admitted, and averted her eyes lest he see the flicker of dread she tried to smother. The warmth against her skin had grown steadily since dawn, as though Lightbringer sensed an approaching breath of ice and yearned to meet it. "When I draw, keep your men clear. The flame leaps farther each time." "Aye," Davos said, and clasped her arm once before stamping down the stair. Dusk seeped into the snowstorm like ink into milk. In the inner bailey, King Tommen's tent, striped crimson and gold, glowed with lamplight. Its thin canvas seemed pitifully frail against the moan of wind. Brienne entered at the young king's summons and found a half-circle of nobles around a rough-hewn table strewn with charcoal sketches of Winterfell's walls. Queen Marjorie stood behind her husband, hands upon his shoulders, a picture of stone-polished poise save for the tremor in her fingers. Sansa Stark occupied the king's right, hair rivaling the tent's lamplight, her gray eyes following every whispered exchange. When Brienne ducked beneath the flap, the council hushed. Tommen's cheeks dimpled with relief. "Sir, Lord Commander," he began, voice cracking. "Sir Kevin rides the southern road to hurry our rear guard. They may not reach us before nightfall. The wall defense is thin on the east rampart," Marjorie added quickly, masking the boy's falter. "We must shift men." Brienne studied the scrawled towers, the inner concentric walls, the snow-choked ditch ringing the grounds. "East is narrow, the ditch there deeper. If the dead assault that side first, they funnel themselves. Keep the spears there. Move the veterans Davos named to the west. The giants will test the gatehouse." A low growl of agreement rose from the circle. Lord Tarley, grim and mailed despite a wheezing cough, tapped the table. "Another matter. Word from the Citadel this morning by Raven. Archmaester Walgrave claims the comet you saw over the neck trails debris that will rain down tonight, lighting the sky red. An omen, he says, of Lightbringer's triumph." The hand's lips curled. "Omen or not, if the sky itself catches fire, the men will look to you, Sir Brienne." "I will be on the wall," she said simply. Sansa's gaze lingered upon her. In it Brienne read memories. Renly's camp, a candle in the broken tower, a bloody cloak at the Eyrie. So many promises, some kept in part, others still hanging. Sansa spoke after the meeting dispersed, drawing Brienne aside. "Do you fear it?" she asked, voice soft as snowfall. "I fear failing you," Brienne answered, "and failing all those who believe this sword alone can win the night." Sansa reached out, gloved hand resting on Brienne's steel-girded forearm. "When I prayed in the Godswood, I asked the old gods to send a shield, one forged of fire and honor. They sent you. Whatever comes, you will not fail." Simple words, yet they lit something in Brienne's chest brighter than the sword's ember. She bowed, throat thick. "Stay below, my lady, in the crypts." "I will remain with Queen Marjorie," Sansa said. "We will keep the children's hearts steady." Night fell like a guillotine blade. Scouts atop the watchtower reported movement by the hour. Each report crept closer, until the last horn call sounded just past moonrise. The dead had breached the Wolfswood and were marching, or shambling, upon Winterfell's open fields. Brienne ascended the inner wall clad head to toe in plate buffed to dull shine, Kingsguard cloak clasped at her throat. The white had been stained by soot, the silk gone stiff from melted snow, but the seven-pointed star stitched on its corner still caught the torch glow. Around her gathered Ser Balon Swan, Ser Loras Tyrell, Ser Hyle Hunt, and 2 northern knights sworn for the night to her command. They formed a pale crescent behind her as she planted Lightbringer's tip between 2 ice-slick stones. The blade began to whisper. It was not mere sound. No ear could quite catch the note. Yet every hair stood on Brienne's nape. She closed mailed fingers around the leather grip. Flame sparked along the fuller, then coiled upward like a living serpent of scarlet and gold. A gasp rippled down the battlements. Men pressed closer, heedless of heat or smoke. They watched the flame and forgot the biting wind. Trumpets blared from the courtyard. The opening signal. Brienne drew the sword free, raised it high, and a cheer answered, echoing across stone. In that instant, a distant line of torches appeared upon the fields below. Not torches, she realized, but blue eyes, hundreds, thousands, winking through the storm. The dead host poured from the darkness, silent save for the crunch of ice under rotted feet. Here and there stalked taller shapes. Walkers with blades of black glass and bones white as moonstone. Archers, Brienne commanded. Knock! 100 bowstrings creaked. Snowflakes hissed against Lightbringer's edge, dissolving in midair. Draw! The archers hauled according to signals bellowed by Davos farther left. Loose! A shrieking cloud of fire arrows streaked over the wall. They struck the front rank of corpses, igniting parchment-dry flesh. Bodies collapsed in bright fountains, but others clambered over them undeterred. Behind, giants lumbered out of the gale, hulking forms draped in chains of ice, dragging felled trees shorn of branches. One giant hefted a spiked trunk and hurled it toward the gatehouse. Stone shattered, sending chips lancing through the ranks of defenders. Torches ready, Brienne called. Hold your line. She slid down the nearest interior stair to the courtyard, where pikemen in patched northern mail awaited. She could feel Lightbringer's hunger, each heartbeat a hammer against her palm. She stood before the iron-banded gate as the first boom thundered, a siege log striking from without. The wood buckled but held. Men groaned, bracing poles and beams. Open the postern, Brienne ordered. Faces blanched. We strike from within. Hold formation. Follow the flame. Swan nodded once and relayed to the engineers. A narrow side door grated ajar, big enough for 5 side-by-side.
Snow gustet in carrying Rotstink.
Brienne led the wedge, Lightbringer blazing a path. The dead pressed almost atop the walls. There would be no archery duel, only steel on bone. Her first cut sundered a white from crown to groin. The thing burst into cinders that swirled away on the wind. She stepped over the ash before it touched ground. The Kingsguard followed, shields locking. Behind them poured pikemen shouting the stark words. Giant shapes loomed left. Brienne veered right toward a cluster of ghouls clawing at mantlets. Lightbringer cleft 3 heads in one sweep, flame searing a crimson arc across the night. Every corpse that fell fed the blaze. The air grew hotter, steam billowing as snow hit superheated earth. A white walker appeared 10 paces off, pale fingers clenched around an obsidian spear, its eyes fixed upon Brienne with reptilian calm. She advanced, boots crunching shards of hoarfrost. The walker hurled the spear, a hiss like winter's scream. Brienne pivoted, flaming blade lashing out. Steel met obsidian with a clash that shook her shoulder to the socket. The spear split lengthwise, black shards scattering, and Lightbringer bit into the walker's collar. Where it struck, flesh evaporated. The being shattered like brittle glass, leaving a hollow echo that faded on the wind. But the effort cost her a breath too long. A giant's club hammered down. Forced by sheer instinct, she dove sideways into churned snow. Pain stabbed her ribs when steel met ice. The club annihilated 3 wights behind her with the careless might of a falling tower. Brienne rolled, came up kneeling, and slashed across the tendons of the giant's ankle. It howled, soundless yet reverberant, toppled, arms flailing. She rose, reversed grip, and plunged the sword into its eye. Flame flooded the skull, burning out through cracked sockets until smoke coiled skyward like a funeral pyre. All around, defenders rallied to the light. Men who had quailed at the silent tide now roared oaths, their torches seeming brighter for each corpse consumed by Brienne's sword. Still the dead surged. Still the wall rang with siege blows. Hours blurred into the red haze of battle. Once, Brienne found herself fighting back-to-back with Ser Loras, his green-plumed helm darkened by snowmelt and soot. "You always had a taste for impossible duels," he panted, parrying a ghoul's claws before cracking its spine. "Remember the mummer's tourney?" She grunted. "This time I wear no dress. 7 save us, you'd set the dress ablaze." He laughed, wild with fear and admiration both, then surged onward. Near sunrise, the hour when exhaustion becomes dreamlike, horns sounded from the west rampart. Brienne cut free of the melee in time to see a wave of dead giants will a second battering ram, a living oak trunk wrapped in chains of ice. With every step they closed, the ram crackled with frost, drawing strips of rime across the snow. If that struck the main gate, no fire tallow or boiling lard would prevent collapse. She signaled Swan and Davos with a slash of the blade. "We break that ram," she shouted. Single wedge. 10 knights and 20 pikes formed up before the gatehouse. Brienne led again. As they sprinted, Lightbringer brightened until the flame filmed her vision in red. She could hear something now, a faint cry within the steel, not of agony but of yearning, as though the sword longed to meet the darkest frost. At 20 paces, archers loosed a final volley. Flaming shafts thudded harmlessly off giant hides. Brienne leapt first, her momentum carrying her up a snow-slick thigh. She drove the sword deep between vertebrae. The giant gave a shudder and collapsed, crushing 2 wights beneath. Flames burst along its spine, catching in greasy pelts. Brienne rode the fall, rolled clear, and sprang toward the next. Swan followed, hacking hamstrings. Together they carved a bright wound through the cluster, Lightbringer's heat igniting tallow-soaked linen the pikemen hurled. The giants began to burn, stumbling, swinging the ram wildly. It slammed sideways into the frozen earth, broke in half. When the last giant sank in fire, the wights faltered. Those near the blaze crisped to ash, those farther back recoiling as though the heat were a whip. A sudden lull fell. The dead host pulled away in staggered retreat, regrouping beyond bowshot. From the white gloom emerged a single rider, tall, imperious, mounted upon a skeletal mount crusted with rime. The Night King, so the stories named him, though Brienne had never seen illustration or statue that captured the terrible majesty of this figure. Armor like shattered midnight glass clad him from foot to throat. Antler-shaped horns of black ice curled from his helm. In his gauntlet he bore a long sword forged of darkness iridescent. He halted beyond the ring of corpses, raising one hand. The dead behind him ceased their shriekless howls. Silence descended heavy as depth-sea water. Brienne stepped forward, sword lifted. Flame flared brighter, dyeing the snow-crimson halfway to the Night King. He regarded her across that gulf of steaming frost, and she felt something ripple through the marrow of her bones, a pressure like cold intent pressing against the furnace of the blade. Melisandre appeared at Brienne's shoulder, as if conjured by thought. Her ruby pulsed in frantic answer to the fire. "Light against night," she whispered. "Azor Ahai stands across from the great other. The world waits upon your breath." The Night King lowered his hand. At that gesture, the dead host melted back into the storm, as if withdrawn upon threads. Within moments they were gone, swallowed by curtains of snow. Only a field of burning corpses and toppled giants remained to testify the siege had ever begun. Brienne gazed until the darkness where the Night King had stood was empty. Then, slowly, she let the sword fall to her side. The fire dimmed. Steam rose from the blade, kissing frozen air. Around her men sagged in relief, some weeping, some crossing themselves. She felt no triumph, only the throb in her sword arm and a deep certainty that darkness had merely tested Winterfell's fire, not fled from it. Above, the sky lightened on the horizon. A torn veil of cloud admitted a sliver of sunrise, stained faintly red. Perhaps the comet Walgrave promised would appear, perhaps not. Either way, dawn brought only respite measured in heartbeats. They spent the day scouring piles of dead for valuables to melt or burn, torching every fragment of corpse so no remnant might rise. Infirmaries overflowed with frostbite and shattered limbs. Ser Loras took a glancing blow that crushed 3 ribs. Ser Hyle Hunt suffered a gash deep enough to show bone yet still insisted on patrol. Brienne oversaw all in grim silence, eyes always turning northward where the storm continued unabated. When she attempted to sheath Lightbringer after the pyres, the scabbard's leather darkened, smoke curling from stitching. She carried the sword bare for the rest of the day. Evening found her in the Godswood, alone save the old heart tree, its face wrinkled in eternal sorrow. She knelt before the weirwood pool, blade across her thighs. Bark shadows rippled on mirrored water, broken by drifting snow. Brienne tried to pray, first to the 7 she had honored in childhood, then to the old gods Sansa loved, finally to no god at all, only the memory of her father's voice. Fight with honor. If you fall, fall knowing your shield stood for something. She had stood, but the cost had barely begun. The pool's surface quivered, reflection fractured. She looked up. Jaime Lannister approached, golden hand catching moonlight. He had ridden through the night with the rearguard, cheeks raw, hair matted. When he reached the kneeling torchlit knight, he stopped. "I heard you burned half a kingdom tonight," he said, tone meant to jest but trembling beneath. Brienne rose. "Half a field, perhaps." Jaime's gaze found the sword. "That glow, they said it was wildfire tricks. I see now they were wrong." He swallowed. "I gave you that blade to keep promises. Seems you've done more than that." A silence stretched between them, heavy with all they had not spoken since parting on the Trident weeks ago. At last Brienne broke it. "We face him again soon." He tested the walls. "Next time he will come with every corpse between here and the shivering sea. I will need every sword." Jaime nodded. "I will stand with you, even if it means burning like those giants." "It may." He stepped closer. "I have one hand. The other is gold and useless, but a knight can hold a shield firm with less." His green eyes held a flicker of something she once thought disgust, then realized had been pain. "You lit a path tonight. I would follow it." Brienne said nothing, merely offered a short nod. Somewhere under the ice, water lapped the shore. Another day, another night. Snow deepened until soldiers tunneled through drifts as tall as a man to reach parapets. Scouts reported the dead circling, cutting every line of retreat, dragging entire villages behind as frosted reinforcements. Lord Tarly drafted a final defense. Burn the moat with caches of lamp oil, withdraw every soul to the inner ward, hold until dawn or death. Brienne studied his diagrams, then added a single stroke. Her wedge designated to strike at the Night King himself, should he breach the gate. She slept 1 hour in 3 dreams flaming with sorrow. Bewildering visions plagued her. A smiling Renly crowned in green flame, a weeping Catelyn Stark reaching for Lightbringer even as it burned her palm. Her own hands drenched in molten blood that steamed and ran like liquid copper, all warmed by the same feverish heartbeat echoing from the sword. Each time she woke, the blade lay across the furs beside her, heat pulsing steady. On the eve of the second assault, Melisandre presented Brienne a black silk sash threaded with narrow rubies. "A knight may gird herself in flame, but flesh fails," she said. "Wrap this between mail and surcoat. The stones drink cold as Lightbringer drinks dark. They will ward the chill when the Night King's spear finds you." Brienne accepted, though some part of her balked at wearing charms. Yet when she slipped the sash about her waist, a warmth spread outward that made the north's breath seem a gentle spring wind. She murmured thanks. "Tomorrow you quench the sword," Melisandre told her. She touched the steel lightly, a caress that left no scorch. You will know the moment when pain must lock flame into eternity. Do not flinch. Brienne did not ask what that meant. Some knowledge cuts deeper for being unnamed. The final night came without trumpet or horn. Snow stopped at sunset. Stars emerged sharp as fresh sharpened daggers. Winterfell's ramparts glittered with frost. Lanterns set behind oiled parchment to soften their glare so archers could spy movement below. Brienne climbed the gatehouse, Jaime at her side, cloak snapping. Behind them arrayed her wedge of 40. 10 Kingsguard in bright-hued cloaks, 20 Northmen sworn to House Stark, and 10 Tyrell outriders under Ser Garland. They bore long axes dipped in pitch, tips wrapped in linen ready to ignite. In the stillness, a sound like distant thunder rolled across the plains. Ice crackled beneath vast weight. The host emerged. Not a shambling tide now, but a disciplined phalanx. White wolves prowling at flanks, giants in iron frost hauberks behind. In their center rode the Night King upon a stallion carved of darkness, silent hooves leaving no print upon snow. He raised one hand. Across Winterfell's battlements, torches flickered out. An unnatural wind howled, extinguishing flame wherever it touched. Men cursed, scrambled to relight, only to watch spark after spark snuffed as though by invisible lips. Darkness collapsed upon the wall. Brienne felt Lightbringer flare within its sheath, a roaring furnace against her back. She drew. The blade erupted in scarlet so fierce the blackness recoiled like a wounded animal. Around her, torches caught again, fed by the sword's radiance. And in that instant the dead charged, bellowing without voice. Drums of wooden shields beating upon ice. The giants reached the moat first, hurling chains attached to anchors of frozen bone. When hooks caught stone, lesser wights scrambled across, forming bridges of their own bodies. Firepots rained down from parapets, setting some ablaze. Yet still they came. Lightning cracked overhead, not storm-born but something stranger. A rift in clouds spewing shards of burning red stone. Comet fragments. They streaked earthward, ripping scars of flame that illuminated the field in hellish brilliance. Brienne led the wedge through the postern once more. Jaime guarded her left, Garland her right. White walkers glided forward, spears poised. Lightbringer met them in a duel of quicksilver ferocity. Flame-limbed steel against night-forged ice. Sparks hissed, steam scalded. One walker shattered beneath Brienne's upward cut. Another impaled a Tyrell knight before Garland hacked it down. All about them the army locked. Human screams twined with the harsh clack of icebone. She pressed deeper. Something guided her steps. Some inner compass locked upon the Night King's distant glow, cold as starlight. Each time she struck, Lightbringer sang louder, its heat searing through gauntlet into flesh. Pain blossomed, but she bore it. Her thoughts thinned to a single thread. Reach him. A ridge of corpses barred the way, piled 5 high. Jaime signaled his men. They formed a shield tunnel and punched through, hacking a corridor. Brienne leapt atop the mound and sighted the Night King barely 50 yards ahead, raising his sword toward Winterfell's battered gate. He would not even look at her. She was but one spark to be crushed beneath the tide. Rage answered. She sprinted, Lightbringer carving a swath. Whites leapt to intercept. She hewed them, flame leaving crimson after images across the night. 10 paces behind she sensed Jaime, Garland, Swan. Yet their footsteps slowed, muffled, until only her boots hammered the ice. The Night King finally turned. Time hung suspended. His eyes were the heart of winter, 2 perfect eclipses. He lifted his black glass sword in salute. Brienne raised Lightbringer, its flame screaming now. She felt the rubies at her waist grow hot, felt blood pound inside her skull like forge hammers. He struck first. Black met red in a clash so violent sparks swarmed high, searing holes through falling snow. Brienne staggered at the force, knees buckling, but thrust upward. Heat met freezing entropy, steel squealed. The Night King's next blow came from flank, blade arcing like serpent's fang. She parried, twist-spun, riposted. Fire licked his cuirass, but frost flowered across her pauldron, creeping toward her throat. Agony and cold warred upon her flesh as upon the blades. Around them the battlefield receded. Men and dead fled the circle of Inferno born where sword edges kissed. The Night King's strength was monstrous. Each cut shattered air. Brienne gave ground, senses narrowing until nothing remained but steel and ice, breath and flame. A sudden feint drew her guard high. Black glass slashed across her thigh, slicing mail, biting skin. She gasped, pain like liquid nitrogen. Blood steamed in contact with frost. The Night King lunged for the kill. Brienne pivoted inward, let the blow graze her gorget, and at that heartbeat plunged Lightbringer through her own wounded thigh, straight through and out the far side. Fire erupted, not crimson but radiant gold, flooding out her wound, coursing up through Valyrian steel into the Night King's core where the point pierced his cuirass. A scream, soundless, mind-shattering, tore across the field. Frost exploded into mist. The Night King's body fractured, fissures racing from the wound outward, limbs shedding shards. Brienne felt fire surge up her arms, through shoulders, into chest. Searing agony hammered bones. Yet somehow she held the sword. The Night King fell back, half molten, half shattered. His sword dissolved in midair. As he crumbled, wave upon wave of blue fire roared off his remains, sweeping the field. Every corpse it touched collapsed, inert once more. Giants crashed like felled monuments. White walkers burst like crystal sunflowers. Brienne ripped Lightbringer free of her own flesh. Blood gushed, but the flame cauterized even as it parted tissue. She swayed, tasting iron and ash. Snow hissed where her boots stood. Wind carried a low moan, thousands of voices sighing into nothingness. Silence fell. From Winterfell's wall rose a roar, half disbelief, half ecstasy. Torches flared anew. Men surged across the yard, lifting helmets, weeping. Jaime reached her first, catching her elbow before she collapsed. "You mad woman," he choked. "You killed him, killed yourself." "Not yet," she managed. The wound blazed but sealed, leaving charred edges and a numbness deeper than skin. Lightbringer's fire guttered lower, no longer screaming, instead crackling like a hearth at Evenfall Hall. Its heat no longer burned her glove. Melisandre approached through drifting ash. Ruby light cascaded across her pale throat. "Thus was Lightbringer tempered," she said with grim reverence. "Forged in living flesh, quenched in a warrior's blood, sealed by love for the realm." She bent, pressed 2 fingers to Brienne's smoking thigh. "The pain is price, the sword is paid." Brienne looked across the field at dawn's first real light spilling over the horizon. Clean, golden, unmarred by storm. Snowflakes still drifted but melted before they reached the warming earth. Survivors knelt to piers, checking pulses that no longer stirred. Others pointed skyward where comet debris flared and burned out, leaving lines of faint rose across a brightening blue. She sheathed Lightbringer. The scabbard took the blade without protest, leather untouched by fire. She released the hilt, feeling its warmth fade into quiet ember. On the wind came the scent of pine and smoke rather than rot. Jaime tightened his grasp about her shoulders. "It's done," he whispered. She shook her head, though pain blurred vision. A night ended, not the night. She gestured toward Winterfell's towers, where banners of lion and rose hung beside Direwolf. "We mend walls, bury dead, keep watch. Oaths endure, even after victory." Jaime followed her gaze. "Then let this be our oath, to guard the dawn we bought." She allowed herself a single breath of weary relief. Already healers rushed the field. Already horns called for muster and count. Sansa descended the gatehouse stair, cloak whipping, hope shining through tears. Brienne straightened, bracing on the sword's pommel. Her thigh screamed but held. Around her, men repeated a chant. Lightbringer. Some knelt, some kissed burnt ground. She acknowledged none save one. Sansa reached her, wrapped arms carefully around breastplate. Brienne returned the embrace, mindful of armor edges, and for a moment allowed herself the warmth of human contact unattached to war. When they parted, Sansa pressed a hand over Brienne's heart. "You kept every promise," she said. "Not yet," Brienne whispered. "Winter falls slowly." She turned to the weirwood, whose ancient face now seemed washed in amber light, tears of red sap glistening. A raven perched upon its limb, head tilted. It opened its beak and, in a croak that sounded almost like a word, let fall a single fragment of bark that landed at Brienne's feet. She picked it up, smooth as bone, warm despite the snow. She tucked it within her belt beside the ruby sash. Distant horns sounded, troops returning from pursuit. The road south lay open now, free of shadows. Grain wagons could feed starving towns. Children might wake tomorrow without fear of claws scraping shutters. But for tonight, Winterfell survivors would gather around roaring hearths, telling how a giant woman with a sword of living fire faced darkness and set the very snow ablaze. Brienne knew tales grew in the telling. What mattered was this. Dawn had come because people stood together, each a spark, each feeding the greater flame. Lightbringer was a sword, yes, but also a name for every hand that had lifted torch, spear, or prayer. She would remind them of that whenever glory threatened humility. She limped toward the castle with Jaime steadying her, Kingsguard fanning ahead. Smoke curled skyward from myriad pyres, but above, stars still shone. One star, red as heart's blood, burned brightest at the zenith, trailing fading embers like petals on the wind. Brienne lifted her eyes to it and felt the sword stir gently, not demanding, not hungry, merely awake, as she was awake, in a world reborn by fire and promise. And somewhere far beyond snow-churned fields, in lands yet unheard and nights yet unnumbered, other shadows stirred. For now she did not fear them. Dawn's promise lay warm against her back. Still, she whispered one last oath into the morning air. "Let me stand where I must, sword or shield, until every last child of men can wake without dread." Then she squared her shoulders, accepted Jaime's helping arm, and walked back into Winterfell's broken gate, toward menders, toward hungry mouths, toward the long, uncertain day. The smoke of victory lingered over Winterfell for 3 days, curling from charred timbers, seeping from cracked stones, drifting in slow ribbons across the Godswood Pond where ice once lay thick as tyrant's mail. By the 4th dawn, the snowmelt rills had cut a dozen tiny channels through the ash-black slush outside the broken gate, and crows hopped from corpse to corpse, testing eye sockets for softness before lifting their beaks to greet the lengthening sun. Spring, that treacherous rumor, had sent a herald in the shape of a single pale crocus blooming defiantly on the western rampart, and when the children of the castle found it, they knelt about it in a circle, frightened to touch. Brienne watched from the wall walk above, one hand resting on Lightbringer's pommel, the other squeezing a splinter of bark she had carried from the heart tree. She felt the pulse of the sword through boiled leather and linen, and the fine maester's silk bandage that wrapped her cauterized thigh. The pain remained, a dull iron nail driven deep, but it had become companionable, like an old hound's bite scar that twinges when rain is near. She could walk, she could ride, she could swing the blade. She could even laugh on occasion, though the sound never rang as bright as it once had. Something inside her had been burned clean away, leaving room for other things to grow, things she did not yet know by name. Jaime climbed the steps to join her, limping from a bruised knee earned in the fray. His golden hand caught early light and scattered it back across the bailey. "Your flower is causing a commotion," he said. "It's a weed from the Barrowlands," she replied, eyes tracking a raven circling above the keep. "My sister once filched a sack of bulbs from a peddler and planted them in the kitchen garden at Evenfall Hall. Father cursed the mess of roots for choking his cabbages." "A weed, is it?" Jaime leaned on the parapet. "Funny how men choose which weeds to worship. They've begun hammering your likeness onto devotional plaques back in King's Landing." He produced a thin strip of tin, no larger than a finger length, etched with a silhouette, a broad-shouldered knight holding a flaming sword beneath a 7-pointed star. The craftsmanship was crude, but the intent unmistakable. Brienne's cheeks warmed. Marjorie's miracle maker. Or the faith's new heresy, depending on the tongue that tells it. Jaime tossed the trinket to her. The High Septon demands proof you haven't consorted with demons. I consort with you. Will that suffice? He laughed, genuine and easy. Careful. Your sense of humor will ruin my reputation. Then his smile faded. The king plans to ride south at week's end. The small council, what's left of it, insists you accompany him. So Lord Tarly said last night. Brienne folded the tin plaque into her glove. They want the sword in the city more than the knight. I will go if Tommen commands. Cersei won't like that. Brienne met his eyes. Is she free to like anything now? I was told she remained imprisoned in the Great September. She remains. Jaime grimaced. Brother or not, I cannot guess how she'll greet the tale of you saving her son with a blade she fears. She has always despised prophecy. Prophecy spared all our lives, Brienne murmured, though she did not wholly believe it. She had felt no guiding hand when Lightbringer plunged through her own flesh. Only desperation and cold, and the memory of every promise she had spoken into the world. Below, archers drilled fresh recruits. Orphans and washerwomen, the healed but still limping, any soul who could bend a bow. Lord Tarly's decree proclaimed that every holdfast in the realm must muster 1 in 10 for new dawn watches. News from the south spoke of restless graves in the foothills of the mountains of the moon and lights flickering across the stepstones. Lesser necromancies, perhaps, remnants of the Night King's shattering. Melisandre said the great other's fingers still groped for purchase in shadowed places. Grand Maester Lampshire said such tales were tavern smoke. Brienne listened to both, trusted neither, and carried steel. Will you ride with the king? She asked Jaime. He shrugged. Someone must keep Ser Borro's chair warm, and someone must keep my sister from planting daggers in your back. Besides, I lost a bet. Tarly swore you'd refuse and return to Tarth. Brienne almost smiled. He should know better. She surveyed the bustle. Smiths measuring melted gates for new iron crossbars. Marjorie and Sansa walking the wall with baskets of fresh-baked oatcakes for hungry sentries. Davos instructing a clutch of boys how to tie pitch-soaked rag to arrow's haft without singeing fletching. I made a vow to stand until fear sleeps. Fear still wakes screaming. Jaime followed her gaze. Then let's put it to bed. The king's procession departed Winterfell beneath banners soaked in late winter sun. The lion and stag of House Baratheon Lannister, the golden rose of Tyrell, the green direwolf of Stark on loan for the journey, and at the van a new device no herald had yet registered. A blazing sword on sable fields surrounded by 7 subtle stars. Brienne felt foolish riding beneath her own emblem, but Lord Tarly insisted the men marched easier when symbols stood clear. Behind the mounted line trudged 300 small folk chosen from those too wounded or too young for battle yet strong enough to travel. They would be resettled on crown lands abandoned during the long night. Every step south would remind villages between here and Moat Cailin that dawn indeed had broken. They crossed the King's Road glacier-scarred and pocked by siege wagons left where whites had torn oxen apart. At each village children offered Brienne wildflowers, their elders kneeling, pressing raw wool or smoked perch into her hands in trade for a blessing. She answered with simple words. Stand your watch, feed the hungry, tend the fires. Lightbringer remained sheathed. She would not brandish flame for sport. Night camps became open-air councils. Tarly pored over fresh reports of unrest across the Reach. Bandits styling themselves Lions of the Dawn, claiming the flame belonged to old Valyria and no woman should hold it. In the Westerlands, miners discovered veins of glassy black stone pulsing faint blue like the Night King's sword. Queen Marjorie dispatched riders to gather samples. Melisandre spoke of rituals to consecrate the veins, lest the stone birth new horrors. Grand Maester Lampshire muttered about superstition but secretly packed the fragments in tin bound for the citadel. 10 days south of the Neck, under a sky flushed peach by setting sun, ravens brought stern tidings. Dragonstone's garrison had lowered Tommen's banners and raised the 3-headed dragon. Daenerys Stormborn had landed on the island with ships from Volantis and New Guise. Dragons wheeled over the narrow sea again. King Tommen read the parchment by firelight, small hands trembling. "She will come for my crown," he whispered. Lord Tarly fixed Brienne with hard eyes across the flame. "You slew winter's god. Can you burn a dragon?" Brienne felt Lightbringer stir in its scabbard. As if in answer, she shook her head. "Steel forged in dragonfire may wound flesh, but this sword burns no living child of men, and her dragons are no wights of ice." Jaime blew out a breath. "We would do better to make her friend than enemy." "Friend?" cried Ser Haber Redwine, gaunt from wounds. "A foreign queen with fire-spewing monsters?" Marjorie laid a calming hand on the table. "Perhaps Ser Jaime is right. The realm is weary of war. If the Mother of Dragons saw how the North stands behind King Tommen, how Lightbringer guards his throne, she may choose counsel over conquest." Tarly scoffed. "The girl means to avenge her family. She will bend knee or burn cities. Her own letters boast of it. Our only advantage is the sword." All eyes turned to Brienne. She stood slowly. "Advantage or not, I will not be bartered like a cask of wildfire. If Dragonstone seeks parley, I'll meet her honorably. If she seeks blood, Lightbringer will defend the innocent, nothing more." She looked to the Boy King. "That is my oath." Tommen nodded, big eyes shining. "I want no more burned children." Silence lingered until Davos cleared his throat. "I served a king who thought Dragonstone his birthright," he said, voice low. "He followed a red woman's word and lost himself in fire. Let's not tread the same road. Send me as envoy. I know those halls, and I speak the old tongue well enough to parley with eunuchs and sells words." Marjorie considered, then smiled gently. "A man without fingers extends an open hand." The council agreed by candle's end. Brienne felt the decision settle like snow upon her shoulders. She would ride on to King's Landing with the king. Davos would sail east to Dragonstone beneath flag of truce. Lightbringer would remain at Tommen's side until parley returned. The sword seemed to accept that judgment. Its warmth lessened, quiet as embers under ash. At Moat Cailin ruins, where marsh stink rose even in cold, a lone figure awaited the procession. Arya Stark, clothed in gray leathers, her boots flecked with green slime from the causeway. She carried no banner, only a long thin blade at belt and eyes a storm's calm center. When Sansa enveloped her sister in an embrace, the men cheered, yet Arya's gaze hovered on Brienne. "I dreamed of you," she said that night by the cook fire, tossing bones to a stray hound. "You were a tower of blue glass, and a white race of crows beat against your walls but could not break through. I think the crows wore faces of kings." "Prophecies again," Brienne sighed. "Dreams," Arya corrected. "Madness if you ignore them." She studied the sword across Brienne's knees. "Will you give me a lesson? In swordplay? In truth?" Arya's voice hardened. "They call you Dawn Knight, yet you bleed like anyone. Teach me to stand unbroken. I intend to kill a queen." Brienne started. "Cersei." When Arya nodded, Brienne's heart sank. "The queen is prisoner of her own faith. She no longer rules. She ordered my father's death. She threatens everyone I love. So long as she breathes, she's danger." Arya's eyes glinted like wet flint. "The list grows shorter. I finish it." Brienne placed a hand over the girl's. "Vengeance yields naught but hollow victories. I have spilled enough blood to know." She squeezed. "Protect your family. Let justice come by law. Law failed us." Arya rose, leaving half-gnawed bone in dirt. "But I will hear your lesson all the same." They sparred at sunrise beyond the camp, Lightbringer's edge sheathed to spare flesh. Arya struck swift as river swallows, slipping between Brienne's longer reach. Each clang echoed across still waters, scattering geese. When sweat dampened Brienne's hair, she laughed despite herself. To meet speed with patient strength felt right, the rhythm of dawn matching dusk. They parted with mutual nod. But that night Arya vanished, a single melt footprint marking where her pony stood tethered, reins cut. Sansa wept in frustration. Brienne held her and swore to track the girl if chance allowed. She feared where Arya's path might lead south, to shadowed chambers where Cersei brooded on chains. Lightbringer pulsed at the mention of chains. They reached Harrenhal ruined and empty, its blackened towers clawing at low clouds like fingers of a drowned giant. The walls still whispered with old fire, and Brienne felt the sword respond, ripples shimmering along its fuller though no flame kindled. Jaime walked beside her through the shattered hall of 1,000 hearths, voice hushed. "This place birthed my nightmares," he confessed. "Dark wings, dark words. All began when Ares whispered here of wildfire beneath King's Landing." He paused before the cracked throne of black stone. "Funny how the thing that destroyed him may save the realm in your hand." Brienne touched the armrest, its surface smooth yet chilled. "Fire serves none, save itself. It devours masters and foes alike." She looked up, noticing shapes etched in the sooty walls. Dragons astride armored knights, ancient heraldry she did not recognize. One motif repeated, a sword ablaze held by a faceless woman crowned with icicles. "Legends echo," she murmured. Jaime traced the outline of the faceless queen. "Let's hope they end better this time." They left Harrenhal at dawn, but Brienne carried its ghosts with her. Dreams bloomed, a crown of icicles weighing her down. Lightbringer melted to slag, the weirwood bark token in her belt sprouting roots that wound around her ribcage and pierced her heart. She woke gasping and did not sleep again that night. Riverland's folk lined the roads to hail King Tommen. At Maidenpool, a septon placed a circlet of crushed dogwood petals on Brienne's brow, calling her shield of spring. She removed it gently, hanging it on the sept door so the poor might claim blessing. At Duskendale, they built effigies of ice giants and set them ablaze on the beach. Smoke drifted across the waters like gray sails. Each rite fed rumor. Lightbringer could melt winter itself. The Maid of Tarth would wed the king to cement peace. Dragons feared her unseen. At Rosby, now ruled by a timid cousin of the old Lord Giles, an informant from the capital awaited the column. He wore a spider sigil sewn discreetly onto inner doublet. Varys' little birds still fluttered. His whispered news chilled the camp. The High Septon had declared the royal marriage void until Queen Marjorie answered accusations of seducing the Dawn Knight with witchcraft. Sparrows flooded the streets. Cersei's trial drew near, and she demanded a champion. Rumor named Ser Robert Strong, unmasked at last as Qyburn's monstrous creation. A silent behemoth in white armor. Tommen wept in his tent. Brienne knelt before him, Lightbringer across her knees. "Your Grace," she said, "I swore to defend you from any threat, living or dead. If Cersei calls the mountain reborn, I will answer." The boy shook his head violently.
"No."
"You have bled enough. I bleed because I choose." Marjorie intervened, voice steady. "Let the faith choose their champion. The crown shall name its own. Why must the woman who slew Winter's death duel a butcher's corpse?" Her eyes glittered. "Ser Jaime will stand." Jaime stiffened. "I will," he agreed, though in his face wavered fear. Not of Strong's brute might, Brienne guessed, but of striking a blow that might condemn his sister to death. Oath and blood fought in him. Brienne laid a hand on his. "Whatever choice you make," she said softly, "make it for the living." He squeezed her fingers. "And you," he whispered, "I will keep the gate." King's Landing's red walls rose through spring haze at month's turn, banners drooping in still air. The city smelled of anxious smoke, shops shuttered, faith militant patrols at every crossroads. When Lightbringer first gleamed over the ridge, a hush spread across sprawl and spire. Church bells clanged discordant, then fell silent. Brienne felt eyes upon her from every tower slit, every curtained window. She kept her gaze steady ahead, though her heart hammered louder than chained drums in sallied theaters. The procession wound through the gate of the gods. Crowds lined the streets, parted by black-armored crownsmen and white-armed sparrows. Some shouted praise, "Dawn, dawn, behold the dawn," and threw rose petals. Others spat, calling her flame witch. A child sheared from the throng hurled a rotten pomegranate that burst against Brienne's cuirass, dripping crimson like fresh blood. She did not flinch. At the Grand September, the High Septon emerged in cloth of gold, 7-pointed crystal lantern cradled like newborn. He bade the king welcome, then fixed Brienne with rheumy eyes. "Light must be tested in holy flame," he intoned. "The Dawn Knight shall present her sword for blessing at sunrise service." "Lightbringer needs no other blessing," Lord Tarly growled. But Tommen, under the gaze of thousands, agreed. That night, Melisandre sought Brienne in her temporary cell above the King's Gate barracks. The Red Woman's cheeks glowed as if with fever. "Show them fire," she whispered. "Let their altar melt beneath your blade. Let the sept tremble." Brienne turned away. "I will not desecrate faith to win hearts." "Then hearts will brand you heretic anyway," Melisandre said. "Better a true heresy than a false conforming." Brienne sighed. "Must everything burn?" Melisandre's smile was sad. "Until the world no longer stinks of death." Sunrise painted the great September-stained glass blood orange and lilac. The nave brimmed with nobles and small folk sorted by status into concentric rings. 7 white marble altars rimmed the central dais. Between them rose a brazier big enough for a horse's skull, coals already glowing. The high septon stood beside it, attendants bearing vials of holy oil. King Tommen sat in velvet cushions, Queen Marjorie at his right, Lord Tarly at his left, knuckles bone-white on sword pommel. Jaime lingered behind, formal armor polished to mirror. Brienne advanced down the aisle under the weight of 10,000 breaths. She wore no helm, her gold-brown hair braided tight, Valkyrie tall among lords. She halted before the brazier and drew Lightbringer. Flame curled up the steel, softer than in battle, a candle's devotion. Gasps rippled. The high septon raised his lantern. "If this be Lightbringer, sword of heroes, let it abide the fire of righteousness." He signaled an acolyte who poured oil onto the coals. The brazier roared, tongues of gold reaching.
Neel, Ser Brienne.
She knelt, sword horizontal across upturned palms. Fire licked the blade, first as caress, then hungry. The steel shone, rippled, glowed. Brienne felt heat but no pain. The crowd hushed. The high septon's lantern flickered, crystal refracting prismatic shards across her face. "Do you swear that this weapon shall never be turned to tyranny, nor brought down upon the innocent?" "I swear," she answered. "Do you swear that no oath shall bind you above the 7, nor turn you from the gods' justice?" She hesitated. In her mind rose Sansa's frightened eyes, Arya's clenched jaw, Jaime's bruised heart. Lightbringer pulse-throbbed. She met the high septon's gaze. "I swear to stand for the innocent. Justice beyond mortal law I leave to the gods." Murmurs. The septon's lips thinned. "Then prove the sword pure. Quench it." He gestured to an acolyte who lifted a silver basin of holy water. Brienne remembered Melisandre's warning. Pain seals flame. Water could extinguish a coal and crack a blade. But prophecy had always twisted toward suffering. She rose. "Water alone will not prove purity," she said. "Lightbringer knows only one forge." Without further word, she drew knife across her forearm. Shallow, but blood flowed. Gasps. She held the wound above the brazier. Red droplets hissed upon coals. Then, before anyone could cry out, she thrust Lightbringer into her own bleeding cut, pressing edge against flesh. Fire exploded, white this time, silent, blinding. The sword drank her blood, cauterized, shone star-bright. Pain leapt up her arm, then swallowed itself, replaced by warmth like summer sun. She withdrew the blade. No wound remained. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some wailing witchcraft. Sparks drifted down like pollen. The high septon stared, lantern trembling. He set it on the altar and sank to knees. One by one septons followed. Even Tarly bowed his head. Only Jaime did not bend. He watched Brienne with wonder edged by fear. Brienne turned, lifted Lightbringer high. "The sword is witness," she declared. "Let any who would wield it swear to spill their own blood before another's." She sheathed, stepped from dais. In that moment bells tolled riotous. A sparrow burst through western arch, screaming, "The Dragon Queen sails upriver, dragons over Blackwater." The fleet burns. Panic churned. Marjorie seized Tommen's hand. Tarly barked for guard muster. Jaime reached Brienne's side, mouth askew. Your fire may meet hers sooner than parley. Brienne slid helm overhead. Then let us greet her not with swords drawn but gates open. Dragons no hunger. We shall feed them hope. Outside, the sept smoke already smeared the sky where enemy ships burned in a bright scar. Yet those flames paled beside Lightbringer's steady glow, and Brienne felt no dread, only the rising tide of purpose. Not wars past, nor kings fallen, nor prophets' chains would decide the world's next dawn. She would. She mounted her horse, Jaime at stirrup, the Kingsguard spreading white and soot-gray cloaks. Horns brayed from Red Keep's walls. Dragons roared answer in the distance. Brienne drew steel. The realm held its breath between two fires, and she rode into the widening space. The dragons arrived at the height of afternoon when the sunlight lay heavy on the Red Keep's baked stones and the gutters stank of half-dried butcher's offal. First came silence, a lull eerie as the hush that falls before lightning splits a summer sky. Then a shadow vast enough to swallow the sprawl of Flea Bottom. Street urchins pointed upward, mouths agape, and the vendors in the painted market froze mid-haggle while steamy cauldrons of eel stew went untended. Mothers snatched babes to breasts. Old men crossed themselves twice, once for fear, once for awe. Above the city spun two dragons, one a burnished red deep as a garnet held to lamplight, the other dark jade with wings the color of storm-tossed seawater. Their cries were half fife, half breaking glass, and every window in Visigna's hill sang with the echo. Brienne sat astride her destrier at the mouth of the Street of the Sisters when the first shadow rippled over her helm. She felt Lightbringer stir just as it had in Winterfell when frost giants thundered at the walls. Only now the warmth that blossomed along her ribs was gentler, a hearth beckoning a weary traveler. Jaime, mounted beside her, muttered a curse. He had stood beneath a dragon's wings once before at Harrenhal, when he was young and foolish and Rhaegar Targaryen still drew breath. They are larger now, he whispered, and Brienne heard the threat buried in wistful wonder. Ser Balon Swan reigned in a foam-flecked courser. Reports of a third beast, he said, lip trembling from forced calm. A black one stalking the coast. Brienne gazed along the serpentine column of gold and crimson soldiers guarding the approach to the Great September. Scores of helms glinting, spears trembling like reeds in storm tide. Through their ranks she could just make out King Tommen's litter beneath a scarlet awning, the boy's face ghost-pale. Queen Marjorie sat unveiled at his side, eyes unflinching on the sky, perhaps recalling the gardens of Highgarden when bees hummed at rose blossoms and dragons were only fables meant to thrill bored ladies. A horn blared from the mud gate, another answered from the river. Down the rush sailed three narrow-hulled warships bearing black masts and the three-headed dragon sewn in silver thread. Their sails snapped like thunderclaps, announcing the mother of dragons to a city that had burned once beneath a mad king's whim and now feared fire's return. Yet no catapult crew loose stones, no scorpion spat iron. Lord Tarly had forbidden such provocation. Brienne had insisted as well, though every disgruntled captain in the city watch cursed her caution. "Hold the lines," she commanded, voice rolling along the cobbles. Knights echoed the order. Shields rattled, a great steel shiver. She felt in her marrow that today would hinge not on sword strokes but on words. Still, Lightbringer's hilt fitted her gauntlet like a promise. The Red Keep's bronze gates groaned apart at last, and the royal procession emerged. King, queen, hand, and a tail of white cloaks gleaming in half-sun. The boy wore his crown of stag's antlers and lion's mane, too large for his brow, and beneath it trembled a child who had watched a dead god break against a flaming sword. He looked to Brienne first. She nodded once, slow, and the crown steadied. They rode to the plaza before the dragon pit's ruined shell, where once the Targaryen brood had been chained. Ash still haunted the crevices in purple-gray streaks. On the broad steps burned braziers erected at dawn. Their smoke curled straight upward, the wind holding its breath. There, between columns blackened ages ago by dragon flame, waited Daenerys Targaryen. She wore neither crown nor armor, only a sleeveless tunic of white samite cinched with a dragonbone belt, and her silver hair braided in 3 thick ropes that fell to her hips. At her right stood the eunuch Lord Varys, humming with placid amusement. At her left paced Grey Worm in immaculate pale mail. Behind them crouched the Garnet Dragon, Drogon, Brienne guessed, muscles rippling beneath onyx scales, the air around its nostrils shimmering with heat. Sunlight danced through his wings, revealing veins dyed crimson as heart's blood. When Brienne dismounted, the great beast's pupils narrowed to dagger slits, and she felt heat brush her cheeks as from a forge door swung wide. The plaza emptied of noise but for the slower, heavier beat of some unseen drum, her heart seeking rhythm with the dragons. Tommen swallowed and addressed the Queen of Dragons, voice reedy. "You fly unwelcome banners in my realm." Daenerys inclined her head. "Your realm may yet be ours, your grace. I come not as conqueror today, but as breaker of chains. So shall we speak of chains? Or of crowns?" Lord Tarly's jaw flexed. Brienne stepped forward before he could draw steel. "Speak first of peace," she said. Lightbringer shimmered over her shoulder like a dawning star. "There is more than one night to fear." Daenerys studied her. "You wield my ancestors' metal," she observed, "and a fire not from dragon breath. I saw its glow over the city walls." Her violet eyes were calm, but Brienne noted the subtle spread of her stance, as though bracing for wind. Balance. Resolve. Jaime had once described Rhaegar as an eddy of quiet power. She felt that echo here. Brienne unbuckled the scabbard and laid Lightbringer flat upon the dragon pit's cracked marble, midway between the two monarchs. Flame flickered along its rippled edge. Gasps fluttered from the crowd. She kept her hand near but not touching. "A sword cannot parley," she said. "Let words stand between us first." Slowly Daenerys stepped forward, knee-length boots clicking. She knelt, queen though she was, and extended a palm over the blade. The heat licked her skin but did not burn. "Valyrian steel remembers dragonfire," she murmured. "Yet this fire is something else, older, perhaps, wilder." She looked up, met Brienne's gaze. "Tell me, Sir Knight, do you swear that this flame shall never turn against the meek?" Brienne answered, voice steady, "I swear. Then I will swear likewise. My dragons will not scorch a realm that bends no knee to fear." Daenerys rose, leaving Lightbringer on the stone. She turned to Tommen. "Keep your crown, boy king, if you keep your people safe. I will not burn children, though my birthright burned once." She exhaled, and the dragon behind her rumbled in restless concord. "But I demand justice for crimes done by those who wear your colors." Tarly cleared his throat. "Queen Daenerys refers to Lord Tywin's purge, perhaps, long past and paid in blood? Or the murdered babes in King's Landing?" His tone challenged. She shook her head. "I refer to the woman held prisoner here, whose treachery birthed wildfire and suffering. Cersei Lannister." At that name, the crowd stirred, some in hunger for spectacle, others in dread. Jaime shifted beside Brienne like a horse stung by invisible flies. Tommen's voice cracked again. "She awaits trial by the faith. The faith deals in confession," Daenerys said. "But whose faith judges a queen mother who wrapped the city in threat of dragon flame before dragons flew again?" She stepped back, hands folding at her waist. "Let her stand trial not before sparrows but before those she wronged. The small folk." Tarly bristled. "Mob justice? Never." Brienne placed a calming hand on the hand's pauldron. "Perhaps a council of peers, 7 chosen by both crowns." She turned toward Daenerys. 3 from each side, and a 7th by mutual agreement." Daenerys considered. "A just number." Tommen swallowed, nodded. "Choose your 3, my lady," he told Daenerys. "I will name mine." His eyes flicked to Brienne with pleading question. Brienne dipped her helm. "I will serve if asked." "And I," Jaime said unexpectedly. All eyes pivoted. "My sister's fate must be heard by someone who loved her, lest the scales tilt." His voice wavered but held. Tarly whispered fierce protest, but Tommen silenced him with a raise of hand. kingly despite the tremble. Ser Jaime will sit. Brienne will sit. Grand Maester Lampshire will sit. That is 3. Daenerys announced hers. Tyrion Lannister, her hand. Missandei of Noth, her voice. And Grey Worm, commander of Unsullied. None could dispute they were foreigners, yes, but Tyrion was once of the realm, and fairness required voices of diverse tongues. The 7th seat remained. Silence stretched. Drogon hissed low. "Let it be the Smith," Marjorie said, stepping from her litter. She pointed to the crowd, where stood Gendry Waters in plain leathers, sweat-shined arms folded. The bastard of King Robert, taken briefly by Melisandre years earlier, now master of the royal forge.
Surprise rippled.
"He knows the heat of steel," the queen added, "and the cost when power is abused." Gendry's jaw dropped. He glanced at Brienne, who nodded. And so it was done. 7 to judge 1. Cersei awaited in a cell carved beneath the September of Baelor, where pale candles dripped wax like flesh melting from bone. She wore a simple shift of undyed wool. Her hair, once a golden helm, lay cropped to ragged stubble from shame's walk, yet her green eyes blazed unbowed. When the Council of 7 entered, she laughed, a brittle sound. "So the dragon bitch thinks to parade her righteousness," she sneered, "and my sweet brother holds her leash." Her gaze lingered on Jaime, voice softening to venomous silk. "Does she let you warm her bed, brother? Or does the giantess guard your virtue?" Brienne's fingers flexed on the pommel. Tyrion approached his sister propped against cold stone. "We are here to weigh truth," he said. "Speak plainly." "Truth," Cersei spat. "Tyrion Lannister speaks of truth? You murdered father." "Enough," Jaime said, voice low. "The council will ask questions." For hours they probed. Rumors of scorched caches, secret letters to Euron Greyjoy, whispers of plague plotted for rival courts. Cersei gave back mockery and riddles, sometimes tears, never remorse. Missandei recorded each word on parchment. Gendry, who had swung Robert's hammer in rowboats and anvil smoke, stared silent, knuckles whitening whenever Cersei railed against bastards breeding like rats. At dusk, the 7 retired to the nave of the shattered September, its stained glass now replaced by plain panes after debris from Tyrion's wildfire had rained down years ago. They deliberated by lantern light. Tyrion, citing precedents of Targaryen council trials, argued for life imprisonment. Grey Worm favored execution. Missandei leaned toward exile across the narrow sea. Jaime maintained a rigid silence until Brienne spoke. "Cersei Lannister set wildfire under this city more than once," she said. "Yet the sword that ended winter will not feed further war if we can spare it. She must be removed from play, yet death may breed martyrdom. Let her sink to memory instead. No children, no crown, no voice." Tyrion arched a brow. "Bent knees with clipped wings? Let her live," Brienne answered. "But make her powerless, as the powerless have suffered." Jaime exhaled, shoulders sagging. "She will not accept exile. She would rather die." "Then let her choose," Brienne said. "A ship sails east tomorrow bearing envoys to Pentos. If she boards, she lives nameless in Essos, under vow never to cross west again. If she refuses, the realm will carry out lawful execution by sword. Mine, if none other stands." She met Jaime's stare. "Blood should not judge blood. I will swing." Silence, broken only by lantern hiss. Grey Worm nodded first. "Just." Missandei murmured agreement. Gendry grunted assent. Tyrion's eyes glittered sadness but accepted. Jaime's voice caught. "I yield to counsel." The verdict delivered, they filed one by one from the nave, leaving Brienne last. She paused, touched Lightbringer's hilt. It rested dormant, as though satisfied swords were not needed tonight. Yet in her mind flickered the image of Cersei at Winterfell's dwarfed gates, wailing for her children, flames devouring her golden hair. She shook off the phantom. Justice, not vengeance. Night had deepened black as ink when Brienne found the Red Keep's highest battlement deserted save for a single figure leaning upon the crenel. Daenerys Targaryen watched her dragons will beyond the walls, moonlight rippling along their backs like oil. When Brienne approached, the queen spoke without turning. "My dragons sense your blade," she said. "Drogon especially. He snorts each time it burns. In another life they might have fought." "They still might," Brienne replied. Daenerys turned, silver hair glimmering. "I hope not. The realm bleeds from too many old wounds. I would suture, not sever." She gestured at Lightbringer where its pommel peeked over Brienne's shoulder. "Will you teach me how to wield that fire to heal?" Brienne thought of the pain, the forging through flesh and frost. "It cannot be taught, only chosen, and paid for." She glanced at the dragon's silhouettes. "Your beasts are fire made flesh. Mine is flesh made fire. Neither bends easily. Yet both answer the same call," Daenerys said softly. Then, after a pause, "I have wondered, if Lightbringer burns brightest when fed by love, what flame feeds hate? Could this city survive another day of hate?" Brienne looked down at sprawling streets lit by scattered torches, each glowing ember a life. "Love or duty? Sometimes they are one." She faced the queen. "Today duty was mercy. Tomorrow we build." Daenerys smiled faint, a flicker of relief. "Build. Dragons can torch fields for new seeds." She extended a hand. Brienne clasped it, noting the ridges of callus along sword fingers like her own. "Come to Dragonstone when this is settled," Daenerys said. "Help me forge a peace as strong as Valyrian steel." Brienne nodded. First, the trial. Cersei chose mourning to answer verdict. She accepted exile with a laugh, demanded a proper ship befitting a queen. Then slashed a jailer's throat with a shard of mirror while he drew her bath. She donned his keys, unlocked her cell, and attempted flight through catacombs once lined with wildfire pots. Pots now sealed or removed. The Kingsguard caught her at a dead-end corridor. Brienne approached, helm under arm, Lightbringer glowing faint as dawn bled through arrow slits. Cersei's bare feet left bloody prints. "You," she hissed, pressing back against cold wall. "Come to add another notch to your legend? Giant wench kills lioness." Brienne stopped 2 paces away. "The realm gave you a ship. You chose steel." Cersei slid down the wall to sit, legs folding elegantly despite shackles. "I would rather burn with my city than bow to foreign curs." She tilted head, eyes gleaming. "Will you kill me now, hero?" "Your brother still loves you," Brienne said. Cersei barked a brittle laugh. "Love is weakness. You know that." "Love lit Lightbringer," Brienne answered. She drew the sword. Flame leapt but small, sorrowful. "Do you repent? Repentance is for the beaten." "So be it." Brienne raised the blade, but Jaime appeared, running, breath ragged. "Wait." Guards parted. He knelt beside his sister, golden hand cupping her cheek. Tears tracked down dust-blotched skin. "Let me hold her," he rasped. Brienne lowered the sword. Silence stretched. Then, in voice barely above wind, Jaime whispered, "Forgive me." He drew a slender dagger from his belt, the one he'd carried since Riverland's days, and slid it swift across Cersei's throat. Her eyes widened in shock, not pain, as crimson blossomed. He cradled her until life drained away, whispering words only they two heard. When her body sagged, he closed her lids with trembling fingers, kissed her brow, and surrendered the dagger to Brienne hilt first. "Justice," he said, voice hollow, "by her own blood." Then he wept. Brienne sheathed Lightbringer, his flame dimmed to ember. Cersei's pyre rose on the hill of Rhaenys, where wildfire had once turned flesh to green specters. No wildfire touched this burning, only clean alder limbs and rose petals cast by Queen Marjorie, who had known Cersei's cruelty yet granted grace. The smoke curled pale and sweet. Daenerys attended in silver cloak, dragons circling high so their shadows crossed the pyre only twice, like wings of morning. Tommen wept quietly, supported by Gendry, who bore new lordly blue surcoat, his parentage acknowledged at last. Jaime stood alone until Brienne joined him. They said nothing. The heat of fire felt gentler than Winterfell's pyres, but pain was pain. When ash settled, Brienne felt a weight lift, sorrowful yet necessary. The city's bells tolled not for death but for dawn long overdue. Weeks passed. King Tommen and Queen Margaery signed the Concord of Two Flames. Targaryen dragons would defend the realm against any undead remnants. In return, the crown pledged funds and labor to rebuild cities east and west ravaged by war. The faith militant, chastened by spectacle, agreed to limit arms to temple precincts and renounced political trial in favor of shared councils. Lord Tarly returned to Horn Hill to raise new levies, not for conquest but for roads and dikes. Brienne spent mornings on the city docks overseeing shipments of grain north. Winterfell still starved, and afternoons drilling new dawn watches. Mixed companies sworn to patrol graveyards by torchlight until memory of whites faded. By night she walked the ramparts of the Red Keep, Lightbringer in silence. Some nights she met Daenerys in map rooms to discuss castles needing garrisons. Other nights she listened to Jaime recite passages of the Book of Brothers he had begun rewriting, entries left blank for years. When he reached Ser Brienne of the Kingsguard, he offered Quill. She refused. "Write it after my sword rests," she said. "When oaths end." One crisp morning a raven arrived from the wall's ruins. Tormund Giantsbane requested parley. Wildlings wished to cross south, refugees from frostbitten emptiness. Brienne volunteered to ride. Before departure, Daenerys met her in the yard. The queen handed her a small vambrace of hammered dragonglass etched with Valyrian glyphs for hope and ember. "If new nights dawn," she said, "let this remind the dead they already lost to fire." Brienne clasped forearms in warrior's pledge. "And if living hearts falter, your dragons will lend wings?" "Where Lightbringer flickers," Daenerys agreed, "Drogon shall roar." Jaime helped Brienne mount, his golden hand warm as flesh. "I will finish your page," he said. "Not yet," she answered, then smiled for the first time in many days, small but sure. She rode out through the gate of the gods with a retinue of dawn-cloaked sentinels, snow-kissed armor glinting. The streets cheered, but she measured victory not in adoration but in children laughing unafraid beneath hovering dragon shadows. Outside the walls, white crocuses dotted thawing fields, stubborn as oaths kept. She thought of a weed on Winterfell's rampart, of frost giants falling, of sisters reunited and parted again, of a sword forged in pain now humming lullabies at her hip. Ahead lay a road once paved by dragons, later cracked by wildfire, now ready to feel hoofbeats of peace. Brienne urged her horse north, Lightbringer glowing softly, a candle to guide the long dusk between histories, toward whatever dawn men and dragons might build together. The flame did not flicker, the road awaited, and the sun rose behind her, setting every shard of broken glass in King's Landing blazing with heartfire, as if the city itself had become a thousandfold reflection of one sword's relentless promise, that even the longest night must bow before hearts willing to burn for dawn. End Part 3. Approximately 5,250 words. Snow whirled in lazy spirals across the barrows of the gift, tossing slow white petals onto the cloaks of the riders trundling north. Brienne rode at the head of the column. 30 Dawnwatch sentinels in patched mail and wolf-hide mantles, plus a half-dozen ravens bound for Castle Black rattling in wicker cages behind. Lightbringer lay sheathed across her saddle bow, yet even muffled she felt its gentle warmth seeping through boiled leather into her palms. The road was nothing more than rutted track now, pitted by old wheel marks and freshly glazed with ice. Wind sang through leafless ash like distant flutes. Somewhere an owl hooted, bold in afternoon gloom. They had ridden 4 days from Wintertown, following rumors of free folk camps drifting south of Bladepine Ridge. Every hamlet they passed bore new banners, the crowned stag flanking the three-headed dragon, the blazing sword on sable alongside the direwolf-crested Dawnstar. Yet it was crocuses that gladdened Brienne's heart most. Whole patches of pale gold and violet poked through crusted snow on sunny banks, defiant as children who have forgotten the taste of fear. Spring was not one, but it courted the north. At dusk a horn echoed from the fore, 2 low notes. Scouts sighted movement. Brienne signaled halt, then nudged her destrier up a frost-rimmed slope to a bare crown of granite. There, framed against a bruised horizon, she saw them, scores of silhouettes moving between willow trunks half a league ahead. No wights jerky stride this. Tall men with shaggy pelts, women burdened by children or baskets, a shaggy white direwolf trotting sentinel along the flank. At their van strode the unmistakable bulk of Tormund Giant's Bane, beard blazing like foxfire in the sinking sun. "Hold here," Brienne told the Dawn Watch, then spurred down the slope alone. She halted within bow range, lowered her hood, and raised a bare hand. Tormund waved one massive arm in answer and lumbered forward, snow crunching under mammoth-hide boots. "Bigger than I remember," he boomed when they met between drifts. "You drank melted giant's milk while I was gone?" "Only broth and duty," she replied, fighting a smile. They had met briefly at Winterfell after the Night King fell. He had toasted her with fermented goat's milk so sour even Davos gagged. Now she studied the wildling chief. He looked older. New crow's feet wrinkled beneath bright eyes, braids stiff with frost spilled across heavier shoulders. Yet a child rode his back, thin arms around his neck. When Brienne nodded greeting, the girl stared shyly, then hid in his beard. "Name's Spring," Tormund said, patting the girl's leg. "Born the night the dead Ma urged into our camp. Winter tried to take her first breath, but her mother wrapped her in wolf skins and cursed at the wind till dawn. Now we go where dawn leads." Brienne inclined her head. "The Boy King offers passage south of the Gift. Farmsteads lie empty from war. Roofs wait for builders." Tormund grunted. "Some of mine would rather the hills beyond Carhold. But many are weary of chasing goats through blizzard. We'll take the offer, if coin follows promises." "Grain for the first year, coin after harvest," Brienne assured. "Tools at half cost. And steel if you'll serve the Dawn Watch come next winter." "Steel for claws," the wildling mused. "Fair," he signaled, and the column of free folk trudged forward. Hundreds. Brienne's company melted back, escorting the procession toward a camp on the banks of the long lake. Fires soon dotted the dark, mingling sparks with drifting snowflakes. Children laughed at Dawn Watch torches that hissed warm ember. Some begged to touch Lightbringer's hilt, and Brienne obliged each gently, letting their mittened fingers feel faint heat. Night deepened. Brienne sat by the largest fire, boots steaming, as Tormund gnawed squirrel on a spit. "Heard queer tales south," he said between bites. "Golden men in masks, burning fields in the reach. Say the flame which rides with you, friends of yours." "Zealots," Brienne answered. "They claim the sword's embers but carry only torches. Queen Daenerys will ride west come summer to disband them. Dragons in the reach." Tormund chuckled. "Greener grass for roast goat." Brienne poked embers, thinking of Drogon's vast shadow over the dragon pit. "Fire can warm or wither, depends whose hand." "Hands ain't half so clever as hearts," Tormund muttered, then belched enormous. "You oughta wed that one-handed lion, melt his gold, forge a crown." She flushed, thankful dusk masked it. "I keep oaths, not husbands." "Bah, a sword gets lonely in its scabbard." Across the flames, the child Spring giggled. She woke before dawn to distant howling, wolf voices mingling with something harsher. Dawn Watch sentries hurried from shadows, spears ready. Brienne rose, slinging sword belt. A runner burst from Treeline, breath white plumes. "Dead things at the lake," he rasped. "Not walkers, ice spiders." Tormund cursed. "Legends." Brienne signaled the watch to arms. They jogged through knee-high snow among sleeping tents and clustered refugees, toward shore where gray ice sheeted the still water. Moon's dying sliver lent weak light, but enough to see. 5 spider-like shapes scuttling over frozen crust, each the size of a horse, bodies of fractured frost, legs ending in jagged talons. Atop each rode a corpse clad in tatters of Night's Watch black, eyes frozen sapphires, crossbows slung. The spiders halted at edge of camp. One rider disgorged a croak that might once have been a command. Another lifted bow, arrow of ice shuddering on string. Brienne stepped forward. Lightbringer hissed from its scabbard, burst into white gold flame. At the sight, The lead spider reared, sharp legs hammering ice with lightning crack, and shot forward. "Form!" Brienne roared. Dawnwatch shields locked, pikes bristling. She charged alone, blade a comet. The spider lunged. She ducked beneath spiked foreleg, cleaved downward. Flame met frost. Explosion of steam and glass shards. The creature shrieked, legs buckling as molten streak tore through crystal abdomen. Rider tumbled. She slashed, blue eyes extinguished. Another spider leapt over fallen comrades straight for the refugees. Tormund intercepted, swinging a great axe of bronze salvaged at Hardhome. The axe chipped leg but skidded along icy hide. Brienne sprinted, vaulted, planted Lightbringer through thorax from above. The beast erupted like shattered mirror, shards tinkling on snow. 3 remained. Arrows of ice hissed, embedding in birch trunks, snapping under heat halos. Dawnwatch shield wall advanced. Free folk slung stones, children shouting fury. Flame arrows from Northman hunters peppered one spider. Cracks veined its carapace. Brienne sliced a leg from another. The spider collapsed, flailing. She drove point through rider and beast alike, fusing them in burst of light. The last spider turned, limbs scrabbling for safe ice. It skittered across lake, but fractures spiderwebbed behind it where Lightbringer's heat had licked. The shell plunged, sucked downward by its own weight. Icy water frothed, then stilled into black mirror. Silence returned, broken by ragged cheers. Steam wafted from Brienne's shoulders. She wiped amber flecks from visor and sheathed sword. This heat lingered, comforting yet heavy. The attack bruised no souls, but proof remained. Remnants of the great other still prowled the world. "New nightmares," Tormund grunted, towing shattered leg. "We head south faster." "Tomorrow," Brienne agreed. She watched the pre-dawn horizon glow rose. The spider's remains melted into pooling water around her boots. 2 weeks later, the convoy reached Last Hearth's charred ruins. Spiral of corpses long removed, but soot still smudged stone. The castle's new lady, Lyanna Mormont, directed masons atop fresh timber scaffolding. She greeted Brienne, fierce grin cracking sun-chapped lips. "We rebuild stout," she declared, voice big as any grown lord. "And a Dawnwatch keep here too." She gestured toward foundation trenches. Brienne clasped the girl's nimble fingers and promised iron and labor. That night, Lyanna insisted on sparring. Brienne humored her with dulled blades. The girl moved quick as pine marten. Afterward, over stew, Lyanna revealed tales. Bands of Sellswords slipped through Sisterton ports, preaching fire cult doctrine. Ravens arrived from Old Town describing comets of red stone falling near High Garden. In Skagos, crags glowed at night, signs of fire rising where ice receded. Brienne sat long by hearth, stroking the bark shard from Winterfell godswood in her pouch. Lightbringer rested across her knees, flame banked low, yet within its core pulsed light darker crimson than ever, a reminder that balance tilted between extremes. She wondered if the sword sensed new perils. She wondered if she would spend life chasing embers and shards till none remained. But dawn, when it came, painted the snows luminous pink, and crocuses opened even atop this forsaken hill, and children's laughter rang as they chased robins across Bailey. The song of living things drowned doubts for a time. As spring edged north, Brienne's retinue reached Castle Black, now half rebuilt under Ser Pyp's reluctant command. Black brothers dwindled, many slain in war or white hunt. Those remaining greeted Brienne with awe. Some asked to be released from vows to join Dawnwatch patrols traveling easier roads. Brienne counseled patience. The realm needed watchers on every wall, even if the enemy now wore masks of frost spiders instead of towering walkers. That night, beneath shattered weirwood limbs in the old god's grove, she knelt alone. Sky above glimmered with new constellations, a crimson streak still faintly glowing from the meteor shower months past. A cluster of white sparks she could swear formed a flame-kissed sword. She spoke softly. "If you still watch, old gods, let dawn guide my hand." Wind moved through branches, scattering snow dust. She thought she heard distant creak like door hinges, or perhaps old bark shifting. Then nothing. She stood, unsheathed Lightbringer in the gloom. The blade shone moon-pale, runnels of white fire tracing ripples. She thrust point into frozen ground and watched frost hiss away, leaving a circle of thawed earth no wider than her palm, one bloom of bare soil in a sea of snow. She breathed deep, slid sword free, and the circle began to freeze again. Balance. Heat gives, cold returns, the world turning ever between. Footfalls approached. Jon Snow, now Lord Commander in truth, having returned from south to oversee northern keeps, paused at Grove's edge, ghostly direwolf ghost pacing at heel. "My father's sword never glowed like that," he said quietly, nodding at Lightbringer. "It burned less brightly when last I slew," she replied. "The world tires of flame." Jon's eyes tracked ring of melted earth. "Flame returns when cold gathers. I've seen more shadows by day than ever before." He hesitated. "South breeds its own storms. They'll call for you soon." "I know." She wiped condensation from steel. "I ride at first thaw. If the realms of men survive, they'll carve your likeness in white marble for the Red Keep's Hall of Heroes," Jon said, faint smile. "But marble cracks and stories fade. Remember to live, too." She sheathed sword. "I will remember, if dawn allows breath." He extended hand. They clasped wrists. "Ride careful, Brienne of Light." She departed Castle Black with renewed escort, half wildlings granted Dawnwatch cloaks, half Night's Watch volunteers on leave. They carried news. The Vale's mountain clans raided trade roads, emboldened by zealots preaching sword-flame salvation. Dorne dispatched envoys offering oranges and spears. King's Landing readied a great harvest tourney to celebrate unity and fill granaries. South again she rode, circuits of duty carving scarlet ribbons across her mind's map. Last hearth to Carhold, across Queen's Crown with its still frozen lake. Down the King's Road budding green tips from thaw. Every hamlet greeted the Blazebrand banners with cheers and songs. Some new, some old ballads retuned to Lady Brienne Tame the Sunrise. She corrected none but accepted mead in moderation and pressed for seed distribution before festival feasts. Near the outskirts of White Harbor, a courier slammed across muddy road, breath bursting. He carried 2 scrolls. One sealed with the silver seahorse of House Velaryon, the other with King Tommen's stag and lion. Brienne opened the royal seal first. Band of flame cultists captured at Bitterbridge confess plot to steal Sword of Dawn. She read faster.
Serborros land defending Tommen.
Jaime grievously wounded. Queen Marjorie and Princess Shireen hostages freed by Grey Worm's legion, but rumors of traitor within small counseled. Her heart hammered. She broke Velaryon's seal next, fingers trembling. Dragonstone besieged by red swords. Queen Daenerys sails to lift siege with dragons. Council requests Brienne's presence. Lightbringer needed to expose shadow priests. The missive ended with Lord Corley's sigil and a personal note. The tide stirs dark. Come swift as wind. Brienne folded scrolls, stared at early flowers dotting ditch. Wind picked up, snapping Dawnwatch banner overhead. Tormund, still accompanying, glanced at her. Bad stir. She met his eyes. The war for Dawn isn't won, only paused. She looked east, where cloud banks bruised horizon amber. "We ride for White Harbor. I sail to Dragonstone." Tormund spat. "Hate boats. Then guard the sword while I voyage." He swallowed, beard twitching. "I'll march south with the Cub King. Keep zealots from gnawing his crown. Dragon which can handle spiders." "Not without flame," Brienne whispered, hand on hilt. She mounted, feeling Lightbringer's pulse quicken as if scenting far-off storm. The road south shimmered with heat that did not belong to sun. White Harbor's docks bustled under gull cries. Lord Manderley himself greeted her with a feast of lamprey pie within his tidal palace. Yet urgency gnawed appetite. She arranged swift galley bearing Velaryon's sails, then penned messages to Jon, Lyanna, and King Tommen promising return. Before dawn, as gulls skimmed misty surf, Brienne descended plank onto carved deck. Breeze smelled of salt and apple blossom from orchards inland. She stood at prow, Dawnwatch pennon snapping, Lightbringer secure at hip. Across narrow sea miles, Dragonstone's volcanic shoulders rose black in memory. The place Stannis had claimed Lightbringer, false. The place where Dragon Queen now fought zealots for right to breathe. Balance again. False and true, shadow and dawn. Brienne touched bark shard at belt, drew strength from rough grain. She would pay whatever pain remained. Sails filled. The galley leapt. Wind roared like distant dragon wings. As white foam tore beneath bow, Lightbringer shimmered in dawn's first blaze. Not roaring, not whining. Quiet ember, steady, sure. And Brienne, taller than mast in hearts of men, leaned into gust and whispered oath of travel. Let love temper fear. Let steel guard peace. Let dawn find even those who close their eyes. The ship knifed onward, prow pointed toward rising sun, while behind her crocus-strewn north faded into pale blue of promise. A promise written not in marble nor even in glowing steel, but in footsteps across thawing earth and hands joined across old walls. The voyage would be long. The dawn would keep watch, and Brienne would burn, quietly but unquenchable, until every last ember of night surrendered to light. End Part 4. Approximately 5,200 words.